Few films hit as hard as Juice, a raw, electric snapshot of four young men on the edge of everything. Today, we're going behind the curtain on 28 revelations that will completely change how you see this film. From a 9-year wait that nearly buried it forever, to casting choices made in hallways, to a real body on the ground on day one of shooting. And we have one jaw-dropping bonus at the end that almost nobody brings up. So speed up with me. The list starts now. Number 1. The script sat on a shelf for 9 years. 9 years. It is the early 1980s. Ernest R. Dickerson has just graduated from NYU Film School with a story burning inside him. 4 black teenagers in Harlem trying to survive, trying to earn respect in a world that keeps telling them they have nothing. He and his college friend Gerard Brown put it on paper and take it to Hollywood. Hollywood says no, not a maybe. Nobody wants to see this movie. The script sat in a drawer for nearly a decade while the world moved on. Think about what it takes to keep believing in something after that kind of rejection. Most people would have walked away. Dickerson didn't, and eventually, the world caught up to him. Number 2. The script was sent as a writing sample, not a pitch. Here is the part that will make your jaw drop. Years later, Gerard Brown had obtained a literary agent. A group of directors were searching for a new screenwriter, and Brown's agent needed something impressive to send them. Brown sent over Juice, not as a project he was trying to greenlight, just as a calling card. Those directors read it and said, "We don't want a screenwriter, we want that film." The very script Hollywood had buried for close to a decade got resurrected because someone sent it to the wrong people, for the wrong reason, at exactly the right moment. Sometimes the door that opens isn't the one you knocked on. If you are enjoying this, take 2 seconds and leave a like. Subscribe if you want more videos like this. That support really motivates my work and helps a lot with bringing more content. Number 3, it almost never got funded. Then 2 films changed everything. Even with genuine interest, money was the problem. Nobody was rushing to write the check. But then 1991 happened. New Jack City came out. Boys and the Hood came out. Both proved that stories rooted in black urban experience could draw massive audiences and serious profit. Island World Productions agreed to fund a $4 to $5 million budget in exchange for worldwide distribution rights. Once cameras started rolling, every major Hollywood studio began circling for domestic rights. Paramount ultimately won that bidding war with a promised $10 million in prints and advertising. The same industry that said nobody wants to see this movie was now throwing $10 million at it. Hollywood is nothing if not consistent in its inconsistency. Number 4. Ernest Dickerson was Spike Lee's eyes. Literally. Before Dickerson ever sat in the director's chair, he was one of the most gifted cinematographers of his generation. He shot some of the most iconic films of that era. She's Gotta Have It, Do the Right Thing, Mo Better Blues, Jungle Fever, and Malcolm X. Every frame of those classics passed through his lens. He understood composition, light, and how to make a story breathe visually. When he finally got to direct, he brought over a decade of accumulated mastery with him. Juice wasn't made by a beginner. It was made by a man who had spent years studying at the feet of one of the greatest directors of his generation. And yet, even all of that preparation could not fully brace him for what was about to unfold on those Harlem streets. Number 5. Tupac Shakur was not supposed to be there. Now we arrive at the moment that changed everything. An iconic rapper came in to audition for Bishop, but it wasn't Tupac, it was Anthony Criss, better known as Treach from Naughty by Nature. Accompanying Treach was his friend Tupac Shakur, who had just started performing under his stage name after transitioning from roadie and background dancer for Digital Underground. Tupac was not on the call sheet. He was not there to audition. He was there because Treach was his friend and he had nowhere better to be. Director Dickerson, desperate because he couldn't find the right actor for Bishop, spotted Tupac in the waiting area and asked, "What about you, man? You want to read?" Tupac said yeah, and everything changed. Number 6. Treach and Money B had a plan to take over the film. Here is something that rarely gets talked about. Treach and Money B didn't show up independently. They had a coordinated scheme to audition for multiple roles so they could all be cast as friends playing friends on screen. Money B got a firm rejection. Treach landed only a smaller supporting part, and the one person who wasn't even part of the plan, Tupac, who tagged along for company, walked out with the lead. 3 people came in with a strategy to dominate this film. The one who wasn't supposed to be there is the reason we're still talking about Juice 30 years later. Number 7. Tupac auditioned for the wrong role. First, here is something most casual fans have never heard. Tupac actually auditioned twice that day. His first read was for Q, the aspiring DJ, the dreamer, the character with the most hope in the story, and Dickerson was genuinely impressed. So impressed that he personally asked Tupac to stay and read for Bishop, the role he'd been struggling to cast. Think about that alternate universe. Tupac as Q, the gentle artistic soul. Would we have ever seen the terrifying Bishop if Dickerson hadn't stopped the process and said, wait, I need you to try something else? Number 8. The audition room erupted. Tupac stepped outside with the Bishop sides, took a few minutes to absorb the material, and walked back in. What happened next is something everyone in that room still talks about. Money B, who was present, remembers it clearly. Tupac goes in, and suddenly you hear cheering, whistling, people standing up in an audition room for a young man who wasn't even scheduled to be there. Director Dickerson later reflected that what made the performance extraordinary wasn't the energy, it was the depth underneath it. Tupac wasn't performing anger, he was performing the wound driving the anger, and every person in that room felt it. Before we keep going, subscribe if you haven't yet. Drop a comment telling me which movie or show you want me to cover next with strange behind-the-scenes facts. I read every single one. Number 9. Tupac's exit line sealed the deal. After the audition, Tupac walked out, then stuck his head back in one final time. Producer David Heyman recalls the moment. Tupac gave a wink and a grin and said, "You better give me the part because I know where y'all live." Then he shut the door and walked out. Dickerson and Heyman looked at each other. That was their guy. It was a joke, perfectly timed, magnetic, delivered with a smile, but there was something underneath it that was hard to ignore. A threat wrapped in charisma, a warning with a grin. Bishop had just walked out of the audition room in real life before anyone had called action. Number 10, there was a chemistry dinner before anyone was officially cast. Before the 4 leads were confirmed, the producers did something quietly brilliant. They brought the finalists together for dinner. Not a formal screen test, a dinner to see if the chemistry was real or just performed. At that table sat Jermaine Hopkins, being considered for Steele. Omar Epps, a student at LaGuardia High School of Music and Art, being looked at for Q. And Khalil Kane, who had been an extra in New Jack City, auditioning for Raheem. By the end of the meal, the producers were sold. A dinner shaped the casting of a classic. Sometimes the most important decisions in Hollywood happen not in front of a camera, but around a table. Number 11. Omar Epps actually learned to DJ. This is the kind of detail that separates truly committed actors from people just showing up. Omar Epps was not going to fake it. Hank Shockley of the Bomb Squad was brought in to oversee the DJing sequences, and his position was blunt. It had to be authentic, or the audience would see through it. So he put Epps in a room with a DJ named Cameron for a full week. 1 week to absorb an art form that real DJs spend years mastering. And if you watch those scenes now, the way his hands move, the ease of his positioning, that is not acting. That is what focused, dedicated work looks like on screen. Number 12. Donald Faison auditioned for Bishop before he became one of television's most beloved comedic actors. Before Turk on Scrubs, before years of playing warm, effortlessly likable characters, Donald Faison sat in an audition room and read for the role of Roland Bishop, the most terrifying character in 1990s urban cinema. Faison was among a group that also included Daryl Mitchell, Treach, and Money B, all going for the same role. One of TV's most cheerful, good-natured presences, reading lines for a character who unravels into cold, calculating violence. Hollywood is built on invisible alternate histories, and this is one of the more disorienting ones. The only way to understand how right the final casting was is to imagine who almost wore that jacket instead. Number 13, Jeffrey Wright also came in to audition. It doesn't stop with Faison. Dickerson revealed in an interview that Jeffrey Wright also came in to read for the film. Jeffrey Wright, who would go on to play Felix later across multiple Bond films, earned critical acclaim for Basquiat and become one of the most respected dramatic actors of his generation, walked into that audition room before any of that happened. Which role he read for remains an open question. What we know is that the competition for these parts was extraordinary. And somehow, the cast that emerged was exactly right. Quick reminder to subscribe if you are enjoying these revelations. And tell me in the comments, do you know any strange fact about this movie that I didn't mention? Let's build the list together. Number 14, Queen Latifah replaced Afrika Bambaataa. Here is a casting swap that fundamentally altered the film's cultural DNA, and most people have never heard about it. In the original script, the character Queen Latifah ultimately played was written as Afrika Bambaataa himself, the hip-hop pioneer, founder of the Universal Zulu Nation. He was approached and passed. In his place stepped a young Queen Latifah, who Dickerson had just worked with on Jungle Fever, and who happened to be from his hometown of Newark, New Jersey. She delivered exactly the hip-hop authenticity the scene demanded. Would Latifah's film career have launched differently without this moment? And would Juice have felt the same with Bambaataa in that booth? These are the sliding door moments that quietly reshape cinema history. Number 15. Samuel L. Jackson was in this film, and barely anyone mentions it quick. Name the cast of Juice. You said Tupac. You said Queen Latifah. But did you say Samuel L. Jackson? Because he is in this film, playing a character named Trip, and he is so thoroughly overshadowed by Tupac's volcanic performance that casual viewers often barely register his presence. This was 1992. Jackson already had credits from Spike Lee films and Goodfellas on his resume. He was one of the most recognizable character actors in New York. He showed up for Juice and still barely gets mentioned. That is the true measure of how overwhelming Tupac Shakur's presence in this film really was. Number 16, Herron of En Vogue, made her film debut here in 1992. Was a year of remarkable firsts. Tupac Shakur's acting debut, Omar Epps' debut, Khalil Kane's debut, and also the film debut of Herron, the Grammy-winning voice of En Vogue, one of the biggest R&B acts on the planet at the time. Lay out the full ensemble and the density of talent becomes almost absurd. Tupac Shakur, Queen Latifah, Herron of En Vogue, Samuel L. Jackson, all in the same film, made for $4 to $5 million. The cultural return on that investment is incalculable. Number 17, someone stole from the set, and Tupac personally handled it. During production, someone broke into the set and stole items belonging to cast and crew. Tupac was among those whose belongings were taken. This hit a nerve. Tupac had been raised by his mother, Afeni Shakur, with a cardinal rule: you do not steal from other people. Dickerson tried to calm things down, assuring Tupac they'd cover the loss. Tupac told him he'd handle it himself. Days later, someone spotted the suspect near the set. Tupac and his friends moved immediately, confronting the man in the middle of the street. There is a razor-thin line in this story between the character Tupac was playing and the man he was becoming. On the streets of Harlem, those two things kept bleeding together, almost at the end, and the best is still coming. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this video is reaching. Number 18, Tupac went method, and it caused a real fight on set. According to Jermaine Hopkins, Tupac's intensity during filming was constant. He wasn't clocking in and out of the character. He was carrying Bishop through the entire production. Hopkins decided to test that. As a prank, he told Tupac he was being fired. When Tupac discovered the truth, the reaction was physical. A real altercation broke out on set. They eventually worked it out. But the fact that a joke about losing the role could trigger that response says everything about how deep inside Bishop Tupac had gone. He was a force of nature that everyone around him had to navigate and sometimes brace for. Number 19, there was a real dead body outside the set on day one. Let us pause here because this one requires it. Omar Epps recalled that on the very first day of shooting, someone was shot just outside the filming location. There was a body on the ground, covered with a blanket. They were making a film about the deadly consequences of street violence. And on the first day, the streets themselves delivered an unmistakable reminder of exactly how real those consequences were. The cast and crew were not on a backlot approximating Harlem. They were in Harlem. The stakes were not fictional. That reality is embedded in every frame of this film because the people making it could not escape it, even when the cameras stopped rolling. Number 20, there was an awkward romantic encounter on set. Ernest Dickerson has told this story more than once because it captures a side of Tupac the public rarely saw. A group of attractive women were hanging around the set one day. The crew gradually noticed details: razor bumps, Adam's apples. They were trans women. Tupac, completely unaware, had already started flirting with one of them and was working on getting her number. She turned him down gently. "Honey, you don't know what's going on here." Dickerson noted she had been one of the featured subjects of Paris is Burning, the celebrated 1990 documentary about the LGBTQ ballroom scene in New York. When Tupac found out, he laughed. Genuinely. The joke was on him, and he knew it. Behind the ferocity of Bishop was a young man who could still laugh at himself. Number 21. The promotional poster caused a national controversy. Long before the film opened, Juice was already making enemies. An early poster showed the four leads in a bluish haze, with Tupac holding a handgun. The tagline, "Power, respect, juice. How far will you go to get it?" Critics accused it of being exploitative, partly because the red and blue color tones evoked the colors of the Bloods and Crips. Paramount scrambled and airbrushed the handgun from the poster image, though it remained on the soundtrack packaging. Trailers and TV ads drew organized protest from groups including the Los Angeles-based Mothers Against Gangs and Communities. And the irony is that every protest, every news segment, every op-ed generated exactly the kind of awareness money can't buy. By the time Juice opened, everyone in America already knew what it was. Number 22, the film opened on Martin Luther King Day weekend. The release date was not accidental. Juice opened in over 1,000 theaters on January 17, 1992, Martin Luther King Day weekend. A film about black youth navigating a city that offered them almost no legitimate pathways forward. Released on the weekend, honoring the man who gave his life fighting to open exactly those pathways. The symbolism was unmistakable. The audience came. Opening weekend pulled in around $8 million. The film went on to gross over $20 million total against a budget of $4 to $5 million. Hollywood had been telling this story, it wouldn't connect. The audience told a different story entirely. Number 23. Paramount supplied extra security at theaters across the country. The controversy didn't stay on paper. Paramount offered to fund additional security at movie theaters because of what had happened at screenings of New Jack City and Boys and the Hood. In some cases, they supplied extra prints to broaden distribution. Read that again. The studio was so concerned about potential violence at screenings that they paid for security guards at cinemas nationwide. This was a reality for black films of that era, a kind of presumptive guilt, a preemptive bracing for the worst from an audience that most of the time simply wanted to see their own stories on the big screen. That context is part of what makes Juice a document as much as a film. Number 24. The beer and egg scene started a real-life trend. Everything about this film is heavy. Some of it is wonderfully, unexpectedly absurd. Jermaine Hopkins revealed that the scene where Steele cracks a beer into scrambled eggs was authentic to the character, even if not something Hopkins would do himself on a regular morning. But here's the wild part. After the film came out, people actually started doing it. Across America, viewers went to their kitchens and tried it. A single character quirk became a real trend that spread through the streets. That is what authentic storytelling does when it connects. It doesn't just entertain, it travels. Somewhere out there, somebody is still putting beer in their eggs because of Juice. Number 25, the soundtrack dropped 2 weeks before the film. In an era before streaming and algorithmic playlists, the Juice soundtrack pulled off a genuinely ahead-of-its-time marketing move. The album dropped December 31st, 1991, 2 full weeks before the film hit theaters. 14 tracks of hip-hop and R&B through MCA Records. It peaked at number 17 on the Billboard 200 and number 3 on the R&B albums chart. Certified gold by March 1992. Songs from Naughty by Nature, EPMD, and Eric B. and Rakim were already in car stereos before the film even opened. And the original score, composed by Hank Shockley and the Bomb Squad. The production team best known for their work with Public Enemy. Public Enemy's producers scored a crime drama, Let That Land. Number 26. The original ending was completely different and darker. The ending you saw in theaters was not the ending the writers intended. In screenwriter Gerard Brown's original vision, Bishop and Q both fall through a roof in their final confrontation. When the budget couldn't support that, it was revised. Bishop hangs from a ledge, Q holds on. Bishop hears police sirens and makes a choice. He breaks Q's grip. He lets go, voluntarily. That version makes Bishop's death an act of defiance. A refusal to surrender on anyone else's terms. Paramount requested a revision offering more hope. The studio wanted hope. The writers wanted truth. In that negotiation, the darker, more complex version was set aside. The alternate ending sits on the Blu-ray. If you haven't seen it, you need to. It changes the entire moral weight of the film. Number 27. The alternate ending changes everything about Bishop. This deserves its own moment because it isn't just a footnote, it's a revelation. In the theatrical cut, Bishop dies because he cannot hold on. Tragic. In the intended version on the Blu-ray, Bishop dies because he chooses to let go. He hears the sirens. He makes his decision. He would rather fall than be taken. He would rather end on his own terms than surrender to someone else's. The theatrical version is a crime film tragedy. The intended version is Shakespearean. If you've ever watched the ending of Juice and felt something incomplete, something unresolved, now you know exactly why. Number 28. Tupac told them he would never become a movie star, and he was right. This is the fact that puts a chill in everything else. After production wrapped, producer Neil H. Moritz pulled Tupac aside and told him directly, "You have a major film career ahead of you." But Tupac, who had no illusions about the statistics surrounding young black men in America, had already made up his mind about his own future. According to the authorized biography by Stacey Robinson, he told them he would never be a movie star. He was 20 years old when he said that, standing at the threshold of everything, and already certain it would be taken from him. He went on to appear in Poetic Justice, Above the Rim, Gridlocked, and gang-related. Each performance more assured than the last, each one a window into what that career could have become. Tupac Shakur was shot and killed on September 13th, 1996. He was 25 years old. He knew, and that knowledge, that grief, is what transforms Juice from a film into something more, a time capsule. A portrait of a young man who burned brighter than almost anyone in his generation, who understood his world with devastating clarity, and who left behind a performance so raw and real that audiences 30 years later still feel it like something personal. And those were 28 strange facts about Juice, a film Hollywood didn't want made, didn't want marketed, and didn't want on screen, and yet it survived every obstacle thrown at it, because truth has a way of surviving. If you made it this far, leave a like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me which facts surprised you the most. And don't forget to suggest another movie that deserves a list like this one. See you in the next video.